and welcome everyone to the Human Leaders Live Expert Session. This month we're looking at heart-centered leadership and what it means to bring heart intelligence to how we lead. While traditional leadership qualities such as logic, reasoning, strategy and confidence have all been historically widely appreciated in the corporate world, traits such as compassion, empathy, intuition, and collaboration are increasingly understood as being essential to bottom line success in the evolving modern workplace. And at Human Leaders, we're very passionate about bringing this heart-centered leadership to the fore. And we're joined in this by Hema Vyas, who believes that connecting to the power of the heart as individuals and even industry-wide is essential to expanding creativity, innovation, inclusivity, and sustainability to achieve long-term success. She's passionate about championing heart intelligence in business and beyond, firmly believing that its wisdom is as valuable as the mind's and should be validated as such. Hema Vyas is the omnipreneurial psychologist and an international speaker and mentor. Hema guides the path to commercial success, evolutionary and inclusive leadership, well-being and positive impact for diverse global audiences. Her work is centered on connecting with ancient wisdom to solve the problems of modern times, especially by understanding the significance of the heart. Hema helps leaders connect to their own personal truth and build towards a life of joy, love, mindfulness, and prosperity. She's trusted by clients from Deloitte, EY, Google, Guardian News and Media, Parliamentary Digital Services, and Visa, and many more. Today, we're going to delve into her wisdom and her vision on heart-centered leadership. And Hema, I just want to wish you a really warm welcome from the Human Leaders community. We're delighted to have you with us today. And I'd love it if you could start by sharing with us a little bit of your journey. Now, I know, like me, that you come from quite an intellectually focused family, and so to now be working so beautifully in the area of heart-centered leadership, I'm really curious about how that journey transpired.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Sally. It's a real pleasure to be here with Human Leaders. I know we've been sort of connected for a while, and so it's so lovely to be doing this live with you. I have so many stories that have added to get me to the point where I am right now. But I would say that the main sort of thing that really comes to mind is, the heart journey. Really, at the age of sort of 14, I first came across psychology. And that was when I thought, oh my God, this is amazing, to really understand human behavior and understand people. And really, I was already quite empathetic. So I already had an insight into people. I was very intuitive, very connected. So I thought psychology was going to add to my understanding of people and to be able to really help and support and work with them in a really positive way. And then as I studied psychology, I recognized that just wasn't the case, that psychology was very much about science and empirical evidence and how can we fit the narrative they wanted us to sort of follow, rather than being exploratory and being creative and expansive, and how can we embrace new ideas and new ways of seeing things and recognizing people are individual and unique and they bring something different to the space. And so that was all really, really shut down through my education. And I had to really make a choice to go, okay, well, I love psychology and I want to be a psychologist because I know people understand that. And so I need my qualifications so that they understand who I am. But then I had to go on a journey of my own to really, really sort of bring heart-centered awareness, because a lot of my work was, questioning, how come we're not talking about the heart? We're talking about the brain, but what about the heart? And the heart is not just a metaphor. It's not just a sort of sentimental piece where we talk about love and heart. It's actually an energetic field of information. And it's so powerful, and it is a source of so many qualities that you outlined in your introduction. So I really did have to follow my heart, trust my own heart, and to not listen to the sort of mainstream paradigm, not listen to what my lecturers were saying that no, you can't talk about heart. Businesses aren't interested in emotions and feelings, and there's no space for that in business. Business is about making money. And I have to be honest, Sally, my thought was, no, it's not. And if it is, then we've got lost somewhere. We're definitely very, very lost. If we think that the purpose of business is to make money, then no wonder we're lost, globally. No wonder we're lost as a society and as human beings, because ultimately the purpose of business is to be of service, either with your products or your services. And the positive outcome should be that there is energetic reciprocity, and that comes in the form of money in the world that we're living in. And so, for me, it was all very topsy-turvy. And so it's been a real journey to kind of follow my path and get to this point where I'm at now, where I can talk about it and people get it. And I say things and they go, oh yeah, of course, surely that's obvious. But I can honestly say, like 30 years ago when I was starting on this journey, it was not obvious, it was not encouraged, and it certainly wasn't talked about. So it's wonderful to be here talking to people like you who just get it.
That's so wonderful. And yes, definitely a receptive audience and human leaders. It really resonates. I think what you mentioned as well, I read some science about the heart's electrical field being about 60 times greater in amplitude than the electrical activity generated by the brain, having an electromagnetic field around 5,000 times stronger than that of the brain. So it seems that there is some emerging research showing that the heart really is an incredibly sort of powerful organ beyond the scope of what we had historically thought. I'm curious to know, what do you think holds leaders back from really embracing that truth? Where, and you've mentioned that there has been this evolution in the last 30 years. What's causing any resistance to really stepping into and embracing heart-centered leadership?
I think a lot of it is to do with it's evolution of humanity. We needed to go through a time in our lives where we were focusing on the practical things. When a war's broken out and we're just coming out of it, for example, over 100 years ago, there are times in our lives where we did need to look at the practicalities and put emotions aside and put feelings aside in terms of really being able to cope with what was going on. There's a lot of trauma that people were not able to process, and a lot of emotions that people were not able to process, and survival was at the forefront of their mind, and it makes perfect sense. But of course, so we got stuck in that system, and it became so deeply embedded in all of us, and the sort of patriarchal system, the very masculine system, the masculine energy, which is sort of logic and facts and empirical evidence-based understanding of things. But also I would say that, when science first emerged and we realized that we could study things and we could come to some idea and understanding of things as a result of studying science and hypotheses, etc., that it was wonderful. And it was wonderful because it's so validating when science can prove what we know, or when science proves something that we're not sure about and we think it could be true, but we're not sure. So science has a place, but we've got stuck there. And my feeling is that what happened in businesses was that it became brain dominant, and it became so brain dominant and so sort of focused on the sort of factual, logical side of things, that imagination, creativity, and all the wonderful things that go with the sort of more feminine qualities, that go with the heart qualities, got pushed aside. And to an extent where it wasn't just the men or the masculine energy that was denying it, but even women and the feminine energy began to deny it. And that's what created the breakthrough, I believe. Because it's like, when you get to a point where you're so out of balance, we have no choice but to explode or implode. And I think there was an explosion of people really, really going, this isn't working. And it's time to come back to balance. And let's not relegate the heart, to the background. Let's bring it to the fore. And let's begin to look at it. Let's begin to talk about it. And let's begin to consider how it can support us bringing balance back.
It does such a beautiful job of really painting that picture of, I think, where we've been and that journey, and that there is now this sort of critical mass of people who do see the incredible value in shifting away from the limitations of a purely intellectual approach and really, harnessing this different side, this different aspect, these different beautiful skills that we have innately, I think, as humans, and really becoming perhaps even more whole human in the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm really curious to sort of shift a little bit to thinking about sort of individual leaders who are perhaps on this journey for whom this resonates, but there's still some sort of struggle. Perhaps they're facing internal and external barriers. And I was wondering if you would be able to identify for us some of the more common internal and external barriers that you observe in leaders.
So I think the internal barriers are probably the strongest ones, where they have learned to deny aspects of themselves. This idea that we have to compartmentalize, that when we're at work and we leave other things behind, that you can't, it's fluffy to be intuitive. It's not enough to say my intuition says, where are the facts, where are the figures, and where's the data to support this. And I think we have to get over that, because really understanding that intuition is so powerful in the way that we know that the heart is sort of 60% more powerful than the brain in certain respects, and of course it depends in how it's functioning. But if we think of it in those terms, I think intuition is sometimes even stronger, and but we don't know that. And so a lot of people, a lot of leaders struggle with really, really embracing it, because it's like, that's not good enough. We have to change our heart minds. We have to change the part of us that thinks that there's one way of doing it and it's the best way of doing it, and looking at sort of, okay, no, there is another way, that when we are perhaps more compassionate, when we allow empathy to take over, we're not so hard-nosed, when we're able to allow our intuition to play out, we might find that actually we're doing better than we realize. It's this beautiful paradox, Sally. I think that where we think if we work harder, we're doing better, whereas we now know that that's not necessarily true, that sometimes, you have to work less in order to be more productive, because then you give your best work, and your best, kind of best part of yourself comes out. And it's that paradox. It's our thinking is very skewed. And so, when people recognize the power of some of these heart-centered qualities, when they recognize the power of some of these qualities and the impact it can have on work, it takes time to see the results, because it's not something you can test necessarily straight away, but you test it over time, and you see that actually, when you give people more space to be themselves, when you give them space to say, I don't want to work for the next hour, I'm just going to, incubate and think about these things, then there is actual value in that. But of course, the old paradigm was, you have to be working, you have to be looking like you're working, that, you have to be productive, and what are the results? And where's the evidence of what you've been producing? And so I think people sort of resist really creating the time and space to change those structures in an environment that really need to be changed, and to see how it can pan out. Because the people who have, especially young startup companies, when they have done it, they realize just how powerful it is. They're like, wow, we're getting so much more out of our people as a result of giving them the space to be themselves, as a result of giving them the space to express their truth, or to work differently to, you know, how we might expect. You know, it's no longer the 9 to 5. They can work flexi times. If they want to work in the evenings, that's their choice. And actually they're productive, because we're all different. And we're all creative at different times. We're all productive at different times. So that's one of the internal barriers. In terms of the external barriers, I think there's a real stigma in terms of how it's going to be viewed. You know, it's like if you talk about heart, well, that's woo-woo. If you talk about heart, well, is that spiritual? So no, it's neither of those things. It's not woo-woo, it's not out there, it's not necessarily about being spiritual, but, you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, why are these stigmas in place? And I think they're in place because it might have been how one person saw it, and before you know it, it's spread. And so everyone begins to see it like that. So we have our work cut out now, I think, to help people remove those internal barriers, to begin to see for themselves the difference it makes to their lives by, you know, embodying and embracing some of these concepts, and then put it into practice, and then see that actually it has a really positive impact. And of course, there are a lot of studies now where they're showing these, you know, qualities are really, really powerfully adding, you know, to an organization, adding to the quality of life of the people who are working there, adding to the creativity, adding to the productivity. But most importantly, I would say that it's adding a quality of relationship where people are connecting better, and therefore beginning to feel again like community. And that's been lost over the years. The more organizations have grown, you know, they've lost a bit of their humanity. They've lost a bit of that connection. And it's not just about going out having a drink after work. Community is really about being able to trust the people that you're with, to be there for you, not just at work, but to be there in all aspects of life, which is what it used to be. You know, there was a time when people went to work because they felt a sense of friendship and family and this connection. And I think that's important to bring that back.
Absolutely resonates. Hannah, thank you so much for so beautifully, really, sharing with us those internal and those external barriers. I think both of them very much correlate with my own experience. It's interesting, as you were speaking, I was really feeling that, thinking about that sense of when I experience heart-centered leadership, that there's something physical that occurs in the sense of feeling more connected. And it's interesting that it does actually happen at a physical level as well. And it's so sad to me in some ways that for so long that has been seen as a negative thing in the workplace, that humans, for example, should be treated as, you know, as forms of capital, and as this kind of really distancing, almost dehumanizing sometimes sort of a concept. So it's exciting to see, I think, for me, that this dominant paradigm is starting to be dismantled and really shifted through the work of yourself and others. I'm really curious, I'd love to sort of get a little granular, if we can, on maybe one or two of the qualities that you mentioned that really go to heart-centered leadership, and just explaining a little bit about what they look like and what impact they might have.
Absolutely. So I guess one of them is really, really authenticity, because, you know, one of the things that we know is that if people get an opportunity to really, really show up as their whole selves, then they are going to be much, much more engaged. Because, you know, at the end of the day, we know with the heart energy that when there are expressions that are not fully able to come out into the world, if we're holding back on who we are or how we feel or what we think, within context, obviously it's not just about blurting it out. We need that safe space. But if we don't have that, it takes up a lot of heart energy. So therefore, where we're tired, where we're exhausted, where we're not performing at our best, I would say often what I've done is look at those people. Why are they burning out? Why are they struggling? What's really going on? And absolutely, one of the core qualities is that they're exhausted because they're not able to express who they really are. Whether it's their creativity, whether it's their ideas, whether it's input into the organization, whether it's understanding how they fit into an organization. Because, as companies have grown, people end up doing jobs and they're not always sure what they're doing it for. Of course, when you go in, that's why you're doing it, but it gets lost in the quagmire of bureaucracy and departments and different people doing different things, other people finishing off the bits that you've started. And so if you don't feel like you're really, really seen, if you don't feel like you can really be yourself, then your heart begins to hold on to the things that you wish you could say, the things that you wish you could express, ideas you might have. You might be really, really enthusiastic and have all sorts of ideas how you can make the organization better or that part of your, work better or, bring about different systems or processes or whatever it might be. And that eventually depletes people. Eventually what happens, it's that automation, it becomes mundane. We become mundane in our thinking and our feeling, and it takes away our life force, it takes away that energy, and the heart begins to literally contract. And the more the heart is contracted, energetically speaking, the less people are going to show up as their real self. So they become further and further away from who they really are. And so part of the training is bringing them back to, finding a way to be authentic, even if there isn't the space at work. How can they do it in other ways? Because it doesn't have to just be at work. It's not just about how we show up. I know for leaders, it's about understanding how they can get the most out of the people. And I would say, the best leaders are the ones who allow people to flourish for who they really are and take on board their ideas, even if they say, thank you, appreciate that, not the time for it, or it's not going to really work on this occasion. But to really, really give people to the space to really be themselves, because we all have so many gifts, we all have so much potential, and if it's not seen, if it's not recognized, if it's not expressed, then eventually it depletes our life force, it depletes our heart energy. And so that's one of the key ones that I think leaders need to recognize and encourage and help cultivate, because often people don't know themselves either. So part of my work is really helping people get to know themselves, get to know what's in their hearts.
Yeah, I love that. I think I'd love to see that shift to workplaces where that is part of what you receive, that's part of your journey as an employee in an organisation, is to have that exploration facilitated by your employer for your own growth and evolution and self-awareness. That's beautiful. And I have to share my brought me back to a moment I think about 13 years ago when I was a finance lawyer, and I was at my desk at about 2 a.m. I went on to have a really horrible burnout a few months after this. I collapsed at an airport. But I remember very clearly thinking, they're not paying me for my amazing brain, they're paying me because I'm sitting here at 2 a.m, willing to be waiting for an email to come in from another jurisdiction. And for me, that really sort of embodies that sense of that's when my heart really was withdrawing, and that impacted my life at work, but also far beyond. So I just wanted to share that. Just felt like such an exact, precise example of what you were just explaining. So thank you so much for articulating that.
No, I really appreciate you sharing that, Sally, because what I'd say is that, that's the thing, right? You stop being a person, a human being, where they're going, shouldn't be sitting here at 2, unless it's through choice, unless it's sort of literally a one-off, or, but we know how lawyers work, and they do end up working very, very long hours. And if somebody's really driven by it, that's their choice. But I do think that, organizations need to be more mindful of the impact it has, because there's a point where we're happy to do something, and then there's a point where we're no longer happy to do it. Things change. And we're happy when it's occasional. Of course, we're all willing to go out of our way to do something extra, or, to support what needs to happen. But if it's an ongoing demand, I think it takes something out of us. And I think that that's not healthy. But thank you for sharing.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I have several more questions, but I'd love to share one from one of our audience. And I feel that as a man, I have predominantly female energy. My work is heavily involved in promoting emotional intelligence. Because of this, I become intimidated when approaching senior managers and CEOs because of their often strong masculine energy. Much like women must often feel intimidated by that same masculine dominance. How do you think we can find the balance within ourselves to develop our own masculine energies more, so as to stand up to the pushback against cultural change?
What a beautiful question. Really, really lovely to hear that. And I would say that, of course, and it's not about gender, it's about who we are, and we can have masculine, feminine qualities. And I think the way that I have learned to do it, and so this is what I would suggest, is that, one of the other qualities that I work with a lot is truth. And it's not seeing that there is going to be a pushback. It's not seeing that people are going to resist or go, oh no. But at the end of the day, when we find our truth and speak our truth, I do think that people are willing to hear it. And I'll give you an example in a second. But in order to answer sort of, how do we sort of develop those, qualities, I would say that it's about really developing that authentic self that I was talking about. If you believe in what you're doing and you feel that it's important, then you might have to knock on 100 more doors, and you might, if everybody saw that it was important. But there are people who recognize just how important it really is to have a level of emotional intelligence. In fact, I would say the best leaders definitely have emotional intelligence, and the best leaders, unfortunately, I would say they do it naturally, so they don't recognize that it's something that we need to cultivate in others, because not everybody has that ability. So keep on doing what you're doing, find your truth, believe in what you're doing, but also recognize that, when we really, really stand in our authentic truth, then we resonate with this heart energy, this frequency. And I say that it's less about going out and finding those people and more about attracting those people. So, put energy into what you believe in, put it out there, and let the people who also recognize the value in what you're doing to come and find you. And I know that's not always easy, but when you're approaching those CEOs that are perhaps a bit more masculine, recognize the vulnerability beneath that masculinity. Because if they're overly masculine, then there's a part of them that they're denying. And if they are really standing in their masculine energy, then the truth is that they're going to be able to be emotionally discerning as well. And they're going to be able to hear what you have to say. It may or may not be for them, but they're going to certainly be able to appreciate who you are and what you bring to the table.
Such a beautiful answer, so practical, I think, too, Hema, really insightful. I love the concept of truth that you've brought to that as well. I think that's I imagine it's a very important component of heart-centered leadership. And I know we've spoken before about this sense of the truth that almost you can feel coming from a heart space that is sort of dropping into a really grounded and present place, and that truth then being able to really resonate and connect with the other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, is there anything else it's sort of around sharing truth, sort of perhaps even in that context of dealing with a very strongly masculine CEO. How might we go about that bringing truth in a heart-centered way?
And so I'd just love to share a little story with you. You know, when I was first starting my journey, and I was hired by the consultancy company that I worked for to present to a group of men, you know, and I was sort of younger then, and they would have been at least sort of 15 years my senior, all in their suits and their fancy cars, and all, you know, very successful salesmen, and quite senior in their roles. And I had to go and present to them about confidence and how to sell with confidence. And I just remember, you know, they sort of took one look at me and just thought, you know, you could just see the physical sort of shift in their bodies, you know, where they're all like, oh, okay, what are you going to teach us? Like, you know, and I'm quite softly spoken and, you know, very femininely dressed. And so, you know, there was a sort of immediate resistance, and I wasn't ready for it, because I was sort of fresh out of university and working, you know, and so sort of they're thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be interesting, because I just expected everybody was going to be dying to hear what I had to say, and of course they weren't. And so and immediately, as I started writing, somebody said something and it just threw me off my game. I just really became completely paralyzed with fear. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do this. And I looked around the room. There was like about maybe 15 of them sort of sitting around. And I was like, I can't do this. What am I doing here? You know, this is not right for me. They don't want to hear what I have to say. And I just had to, and I was like, I'm sorry, I've gone blank. And they were all, you could tell they became visibly uncomfortable. And I just had to take myself off. I said, I'm just going to go to the bathroom. Went to the bathroom. I thought, this is your career. This is the beginning of your career. If you don't salvage this, you're going to have lost it. And so off I just, you know, washed my hands, got some cold water on my wrist, because that always helps when you're in this sort of situation. Went straight back in, and I said, with real authority, right, what message did that give you all? And they were all like, okay, we were all like, and because they named it, they were like, well, we thought, well, who are you? What are you going to give us? And, you know, and you've just fallen apart. So, of course, you're not able to give us anything. And I said, well, I want you to just know that this is what I'm going to be talking about. The impact when you're confident versus not confident. And they all sighed this great sense of relief, and they were all like, oh, thank God you were just pretending. Oh, that wasn't real. And of course, I know it was real. If they listen to this, they'll realize I know it was real. I know I was really scared. But at the end of the day, when I went back in, I gave a great presentation. It was all day, and literally, like virtually all of them, I think there was one or two who perhaps at the end of it didn't want to work with me. And the point I want to make is that there was a moment of doubt when I thought, they're not going to want to hear what I'm talking about, because it's about confidence. It's about, you know, how we can connect to that level of confidence, knowing ourselves. The more we know ourselves, the more we're going to be aligned with the products we're selling or the services we're selling. And because of that sort of moment of doubt, and then to be able to pull it back in, these were men that I don't think would have been interested, but suddenly they took me seriously. And when I spoke, and when I spoke with such passion, when I spoke with such clarity, they got it. And they all were really, really interested. And at the beginning, they did say, of course, they thought, we're wasting our time. Why are they sending us to this? We don't want to be doing this, because they didn't see the value. And by the end of it, because I believed in the value, they were able to believe in the value. And that's what I say, that it's finding our truth, trusting who we are, and not being afraid of what other people think. The minute we catch their insecurities, their doubts, we begin to express it. You know, that's how the heart works. It mirrors back. And what I was feeling was what they were feeling. It wasn't my own insecurities, but they were all going, oh my God, this is going to be awful. I don't want to be here. What am I going to have to do? But the minute I tapped into my own truth, I was able to then convey that to them. And it's that power of influence when we recognize that we are so powerful, we are so able to influence positively the outcome in any situation. But we have to know ourselves, we have to trust ourselves, we have to be able to express and show up as our whole authentic self. Because when we do, others, their insecurities melt away, and they then begin to take on some of what you feel, what you believe, and you're able to change their minds for the better. It's not about manipulation, it's not about trying to get them to do what you want. It's about recognizing if you're really, really solid in what you have to give the world will see it. But you have to see it and know it for yourself first.
Oh, that's goosebumps. Emma. That's so beautifully articulated, and I think it's so wonderful that you were able to have that experience in such a clear way to come back and bring your truth and your authenticity in a way that clearly very strongly resonated through that room on that day. And thank you so much for sharing it with us. I have lots of things to say, but I'm going to shut up for a second. Turn to a couple of questions because we're getting some lovely inquiries from the audience. Someone's asking, what shifts have you seen in employees and leaders during the pandemic? And I think this is in the context of heart-centered leadership. What shifts have you observed?
So the biggest shifts, I would say, is that where people were becoming robotic and doing something because that's what they knew to do, they didn't know how to break free from it. You know, it's what we're experiencing, the quiet quitting or the great resignation. I think it's so much more than that, because I think it's people suddenly were able to stop and place value on themselves, and not just be robots doing what they've been doing and not knowing how to break out of that cycle of doing things. And I think for leaders in particular, it's been amazing. I think that what they've seen is that the old paradigm does need to change, and that, you know, there needs to be more time and more connection with people for who they are, the whole selves. All of a sudden they were getting glimpses into people's homes and their families and kids walking in, and realizing that they're human beings, really, really seeing it, not just in terms of, you know, the output, not just in terms of productivity and what they contribute at work, but the struggles that they might be having at home. And I think that's been really, really wonderful. And spending more time with loved ones, that's actually made people more productive. I'm not saying that's always the case. Of course, you know, people struggle with different things. But in terms of really being able to spend time with loved ones, being at home more, they see that actually there's a lot of joy and a lot of value. And so we shouldn't be working all the hours. We shouldn't be on our phones, you know, late into the evenings. We should be having proper downtime. We should be. And how that's helped with work is that the people who are there are really engaged. The people who are there really want to be there. The people who missed it, who are like, oh my God, this is what I love doing, and this is where I bring my value. And so, you know, can't wait to get back in, can't wait to be getting on with what I need to do, getting these projects, you know. And I mean, certainly that's been the case for me during the sort of lockdown. I've realized what I love. I love what I do. And so, you know, not working was not good for my heart or my soul.
Well, we're delighted to be able to connect with you now and share your beautiful heart and soul in this way. I think those are really keen insights into some of the positive impacts of the pandemic and some of the insights we've had into the ways that we had left unquestioned about how we work, that actually on reflection are not necessarily healthy, if not much worse. So thank you so much for sharing that, Hema. I'm going to turn to another question now. This is, can you let us know the impact of shame on the heart energy and how one can start the healing journey and deal with this effectively?
Oh, absolutely. So, you know, shame is held in the heart unprocessed because there are two types of shame, one that is being projected onto you and one that you are holding on to as a result of your own narrative. And so the heart takes up a lot of energy when we hold on to shame. It's the same with guilt. There are lots of emotions, and positive emotions expand the heart center and negative ones contract it. But nothing takes energy like shame and guilt. And they're the two things that we really do need to work through. So one of the ways that I would say working through shame is really naming it. What is the source of shame? And sometimes, it's not the most obvious. Sometimes it's the, parents speaking at the sort of dinner table with other relatives and sort of making a throwaway comment, oh yeah, she's never going to be really good at this, or he's never really going to be able to do maths, or she's never going to be able to, cook, or whatever it might be. And, this throwaway comment can create a source of shame for children. And that plays out. And so what I say is that, the heart attracts what we need to heal. And so if we're carrying that, we're going to end up at work, we're going to end up in life where we're attracting those experiences where we feel embarrassed, humiliated, ashamed. And so we need to look at every moment in life is like a moment in the holograph. When you look at a hologram, when you look at a whole hologram and you sort of go, each moment is part of the whole picture. And so everything we experience in life is really mirroring back to us, where we're excelling, where we're thriving, where we're doing really well, but also mirroring back to us where we're struggling. And if we keep experiencing certain things again and again and again, then we're probably holding on to one of these qualities like shame. And so do a deep dive, do some writing, do some journaling, meditation, speak to somebody, find somebody to speak to help you uncover what that source of shame might be. Because when we uncover it, we free so much heart energy that we begin to thrive in the world in the way that we all deserve to.
It's breathtaking, and I think that's such a beautiful insight for us. And for me, it highlights also the notion that emotions, these all the different parts of the hologram, are not by definition good or bad. They're part of the whole, and if we ignore them or repress them, we deny their willingness to help us grow. I think that's a really beautifully empowering way of looking at it, and allowing shame to take up some space too, and to deserve our attention and our healing. And the comment is that was beautiful from the person who asked the question. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Another question coming through. How have you adapted traditional frameworks like theory of change and project management tools to align with heart intelligence in leadership? As I lean further into heart-centered approaches, I've been reluctant to use the same tools and frameworks.
Absolutely. And I think, why do we have these tools and frameworks? I would say we have them because someone somewhere realized that what we were doing was not necessarily working. And so they had to create a framework in which whatever they were doing at that time worked. And I think we're at a time in our history, to be honest, where we have to question some of those tools because they served us at one time. Absolutely, they did. And things have changed. Things have changed dramatically. And I think we have to change. And this is where I say it's so important for us to be creative, to question old models and old structures and how we've been doing things, and to ask ourselves if it works for us. And if it doesn't, dream big and dream and imagine and find another solution, another way of doing it, because there are other ways. This is not set in stone. A lot of the tools that are being used in businesses, they're not set in stone. I have to say, don't really work well with a lot of structures like that, and I have learned to trust myself to say I don't have to do what everybody else is doing. I have to find what works for me, and if I'm creative and I want to be creative in how I express this, you know, we still need an end goal in mind, and that's why I say be creative. You know, what is the purpose of a management, project management tool? And then find what works for you. And I know some people, what they do now is where there would have been graphs and Excel sheets, etc. Now they're going, okay, well, I want to do pictures and I want to express who I am through, images or visuals or whatever it might be. And it works just as well. It works just as well. If you feel that you can work with something new, find a way, devise a way, create a way, create a path, because that's what we're here to do. We're at a point where I think that creativity is in abundance, and the more we tune into it, the more we're going to be able to write a story of how we want life to be, a story of how we would like work to be and how we want to be. And I think it's going to come a lot sooner than we realize. Before, it used to take decades for change to be embraced. And now I think we're at a point where change is coming very, very quickly. And so
that is a delightful and really exciting thing. I think that's that concept that there can be that sort of faster energy to it, to that change. And comment from the person who asked the question. Thank you, Hema. That's a beautiful permission to move in a new direction and release old structures. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you.
Just an observation. I feel like curiosity feels like it's a very natural component of heart-centered leadership. Is that correct, Hema?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's one of the most central concepts, because, and that's what I mean about when we become mundane and life becomes mundane and the heart becomes contracted. And I think we have to always be curious, because what works one day doesn't necessarily work the next day. If we're curious about ourselves, we are going to get to depths within ourselves unlike ever before. If we're curious about other people, we are going to create connection, because connection is real curiosity. It's not just saying, oh, how are you? And really not listening to the answer because you don't really care. It's just a throwaway remark. But when you look at someone's eyes and you say, how are you? I really want to know. You give them permission to really, really show up and share something. And that's why I think I've always been good at getting people to open up, as I'm sure you are, as you have been with me today. But curiosity. So it's not just about curiosity about ourselves, about other people, but curiosity about the world we live in. Does it have to be this way? Because it wasn't always like this. Somebody dreamt it up and somebody then created the structures around it, and we can dream, and we can dream something different. And for me, I definitely have a dream where people are much, much more aligned with their hearts and able to thrive in the world, so that there is, genuine prosperity for all of us. And anything that we can do to add to that vision is beautiful. So changing old structures is part of that.
That's so beautifully put. I think that's such an exciting space to find ourselves in as well, when we're able to hold that curiosity for all of the assumptions. And for me personally, it's certainly a lifelong journey of almost peeling off layers of, oh, there's that too, and oh, there's that too. And being able to do so with a kind of almost friendly and curious approach makes it a really, really fun journey, to be honest.
Exactly. And I think, that's such a beautiful thing that you just said. I think life should be fun. And it is fun when we're always growing and evolving and curious, and changing and allowing ourselves to change and grow and evolve. And it should be fun. We need more fun. And again, work should be fun, and not just because we have a laugh every so often, or, but it should really genuinely, again, that curiosity at work, what's working, what's not, what's going on with the whole, just really knowing what's really, really behind an organization, what's really behind, its philosophy, its mission, its vision. And when people are engaged with that and really understand it, I think it makes for a much happier, healthier workforce.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Hema. I noticed Tina's just shared in the chat a link if you'd like to book a complimentary discovery call with Hema. We'll also share the link within the community as well. So anyone who's curious to have a discovery call, we'd love to connect you with this incredible woman. I'm going to ask, we have one final question, and Danielle, yes, we'll be able to share a recording with the networks. We'll be in touch about that down the track. One final question, if I may, Hema, from the audience. I see you referenced Albert Einstein when he says no problem can be solved from the level of consciousness that created it. When you say to approach these CEOs, for example, we need to stand in our truth, is it this that can begin to raise the consciousness of others?
Absolutely. I think it's sort of all the different things that I've talked about. It sort of comes together beautifully with this one quote, which is we have to evolve. We have to evolve in order to see a new world, to create a new world, and to create a world where those conversations, CEOs are not scary. They all started with a vision. They all started with a dream. So they started with the same qualities that we are all connected with. And so absolutely, when we raise our own levels of consciousness, and like I say, when we have such a clarity of vision in our own hearts about what's possible, the change that's possible, and the impact, the positive impact of those changes, I think people will definitely step up and listen to it. And that includes CEOs and any number of people.
Beautifully put, Hema. I'm just so delighted to have been able to share this conversation with you today. It's been, my heart is both deeply relaxed and aglow with this connection that you've created for us. And I feel also sort of inspired both to look people very directly in the eyes and feel that connection, but also at a macro level to really be able to dream big and hold that curious and open-hearted, open-minded approach as we evolve as individuals and as human leaders and as a community. Thank you deeply. It's been an honour.
Thank you. I feel the same. I feel, both just really the connection, the level of inquiry and curiosity that you've shown the community, and just lovely, lovely questions. And so wonderful to be here. Thank you.